Welcome to a brand new season of Radio with Pictures with Femling Pacific and FemTalk 89 FM, in conversation with diverse rural women leaders, members of the LGBT network and disability rights activists. I'm Nandini Vandana and thank you for tuning in. We've just concluded our second national consultation for 2018, and this week the focus has been on the rights of persons living with disability and what we need to know. Joining us in this episode we have Agu Tuinasau from the Pacific Rainbows Advocacy Network. Welcome, Agu, to the show.
Thank you.
We also have Beda Anjali, who is joining us all the way from Vanuatu and representing the Namau Women's Group, and she is also an advisory counselor in Nambowalu. Thank you for joining us. With us also is Unaisi Mbakewa. She is the Vice President of the Tavua Disabled People's Association. Agu, starting things off when we're talking about disaster risk management and what are some of the mechanisms that are needed when we're preparing for the cyclone season, in terms of members of the LGBT network, what are some of the key priorities that we need to be communicating?
Some of the key, thank you very much for that question. Some of the key priorities, especially for the LGBT communities, I think it's the main important thing is for us to be engaging into those kind of platforms in terms of decision makings, especially for disaster risk reduction. When we're talking about, as an experience, some of the experience that I face is that some of the platforms that, when we talk about disaster risk reductions, my communities are not included. So this year it was one of my opportunity to be part of the disaster risk reduction in terms of decision making. To me, one of the key priorities is for us to engage ourselves into those stages or into those platforms that we need to also go and voice it out, our needs, and also because in terms of disaster risk reduction. Because if you're going to be there to make it our decision makings, it will also reduce the risk in terms of disaster and hurricanes that will occur.
Thank you, Agu. Now, Beda, in terms of preparing for the cyclone season, what do you say would be key priorities for women in their communities ahead of the cyclone season in November?
In my point of view, I think as a counselor, I should give information to my communities that this is the time we should be alert that we are having the information and from the Women's Weather Watch, and we will be prepared for the cyclone which is on the way.
Yes. Yeah. Now you talked about informing the women on information pertaining to pre-cyclone season. In terms of you getting information as an advisory counselor, are you supported in terms of that?
No, we hardly invited in the meetings. We have only 2 counselors in my community. We are hardly invited in communities, in meetings. If we are invited, then we can pass information to other community women that we should do these things so that we can prepare for the cyclone.
Thank you. Now moving on to Naisi, and from the perspective of persons living with disability, how can we ensure that persons living with disabilities are accessing information and also mechanisms preparing for cyclone season?
For people with disability, appropriate information and appropriate and timely information is really needed. When I say appropriate information, it's for the leaders to know where the people with disability living and their needs, what they need during disasters, and the inclusion. As like my colleagues were saying, they were not invited. It's like us too in the people with disability. They are not even invited to the disaster risk management, so that they tend to know what's the really needs for people with disability in the disaster for them during disasters.
Would you say that there is a lack of management when it comes to data collection, and we're not aware of the different people that are living in our communities?
Yes. I mean, they know that there are people living with disability, but they don't know the needs that they need. Those are people living with wheelchairs. Yeah, they need the ramps when it goes up to the evacuation centers, and those who are working with crutches and all those needs. And some of them they're living at home, their wheelchair are not not working. So by the time of disaster, when they really need them to take them to the evacuation center, there is no accessibilities. So it's, when I say appropriate information, we really have to know their needs. What do they need? Is their wheelchair working? Is their crutches there?
Yes, good points. Now, would you say that the media, in terms of information dissemination, is inclusive and accessible for persons living with disability?
Yes.
Is it a platform where persons living with disability can easily access information from the various media?
No. When we see perspective from the grassroots level, we would rather say that as leaders, taking up the information to them or making them, creating awareness to them, it will be a great help. If more awareness, so that they can come out from the comfort zone that they've been staying, so that they can view out their opinion.
Okay.
Because some of them, they're not access to radios or to mobile phones.
Yes.
Especially those people living in rural areas.
Yes. Agu, before we conclude with this segment, what are your thoughts when it comes to media accessibility?
To me, when it comes to media accessibility, as what Uno has just been sharing, to me, because for a person with disability, they have their own disabilities. So, for example, if I may share an example, which is a person that with vision impairment, those who can't see, how will that person going to receive a text message that there's a cyclone coming? So I think for the media-wise, I think they need to be coming in terms of a different kinds of ways that can pass the different kinds of messages to different peoples. Like, for example, if someone can't read, but someone that cannot see, how will that person need to receive us text messages?
Thank you.
Speaking from the places where the person with disability coming from.
Yes. Thank you. Stay tuned, because in our next segment, we continue the conversation on disability rights and what we need to know. Welcome back, and in this segment we will be looking at what are some of the challenges faced by diverse women in their communities to be accessing decision-making spaces when it comes to disaster coordination. We'll begin with you, Agu. What do you think are the real barriers in our community that is preventing diverse women to be participating in these spaces?
First of all, speaking as trans women leaders, speaking from my communities and LGBT, I think one of the barriers or the challenges that they face is that the stigma and discrimination from the community itself. That is one, and also one of the things is also the low self-esteem within the person. So I think one of the recommendations is that we, like for us, trans women leaders, is that what we do is we'll be going back to communities, and we have to encourage them and also to motivate them in terms of going into spaces and inspiring them into attending these kind of spaces so that they can be voicing out the issues. Because, for example, if I'm going to talk about the issues in my community, will be different from the person from her community. So in terms of decision-making participation, I think it's an individual also to be also motivated to go out into those spaces to share the importance of the issues that they're facing in their communities. And I think if it's for young people, I think young people facing it a lot nowadays is that they have, sometimes when they attend workshops and training, sometimes their voices are not being heard. But I think we need to also encourage them that there is a space for them, and they need to speak out and speak out for themselves, because they themselves know the challenges and issues that they'll be facing in terms of in their communities.
Thank you. And what we've been getting from the previous episodes of Radio with Pictures is that women have been calling for 50-50 participation, for there to be a status quo, that there is equal representation. Beda, you mentioned you're one of the few female advisory councillors in the country. What do you have to say to the statement in having 50-50 representation?
We should encourage more women to voice their issues, so that it been heard and bring moments in decision making, so that because now it's equal rights, so we encourage moments to take part in the decision making and give them a space to voice up.
And Unesi, what would you say in terms of persons living with disabilities? What are the challenges they are facing in being included in decision-making spaces?
As I already mentioned, they are not included. Most of the time, they are not being included in decision making. But things that we can do, like Agu was saying, for people with LGBT, it's similar to us with people with disability. If awareness, a lot of awareness can be done right down to the community level. If for capacity building, for them to know how to respond to disaster drills, and how to respond to the evacuation center. If a lot of awareness can be done to the community level, so that it can help people with disability, not only people with disability, but all the vulnerable ones, to stand up and to know what to do when disaster strikes or anything that happens to themselves.
So would you say that excluding certain sectors of the community from decision-making spaces then allows for their issues to be excluded when it comes to decision-making and policy-making? So it is important that these women and the diverse group of women are represented. Okay. Agu, what would you say when it comes to young women's participation and their voices being heard?
One of the things that young women are facing today, and I think it's slowly kind of changing, is that young women nowadays are engaging themselves to the platforms that they can voicing out their issues. I've been talking to some of the young women in some of the villages, some of the issues that they faced before when they have the village meetings. Sometimes when they attend village meetings, the older women or the older people, they're like not wanting the younger ones to raise up the voices because they are so young and their voices won't be heard. But like been hearing to some of the women in some of my community visits that I always do, is that slowly times have been changing, and some of the young women have been using these platforms, and it has been open bridges, the bridges between the old and the youngs. They have been sitting together and also been engaging a lot with older people and also been raising the issues, and that is something very good, and I think it's slowly changing in other environment and also in the communities that we represent. But in terms of the LGBT, we're slowly also been coming up, and there is challenges that we've been facing that we wanted to be voicing our issues in spaces like that. And speaking from a young person and from a young woman perspective, I think there is a lot to be done in terms of raising more voices into the platforms from grassroots level right up to national level.
Do you feel that there needs to be a status quo for members of the LGBT network to be included in those spaces? There should be a number that should be allocated?
Yes, I strongly believe that it is a must also for members of the LGBT. When we have the communities there, the young women are there, we also have to have those people in the communities, that is include person living with disability and also the members of the LGBT community. Because I think these are the only people that lives in the community, and they need to be sitting there to be in terms of decision making, because they will be talking about the issues and the challenges what they face in the communities.
Yes, and just before we conclude with this segment, Unesi, would in our previous segments as well and episodes of Radio with Pictures, there have been discussions around the discrimination that is faced towards persons living with disabilities, and then that does become one of those major barriers.
That's one of the major barriers, and as in the communities, they tend to call them by names.
Yes.
The disabilities. That is one of the big barriers that people with disability don't want to come out to the public. Is that because people tend to look at them differently, and the discriminations they tend to be done at them.
Okay. Thank you. Stay tuned, because in our next segment we will again continue conversations around disaster risk management and disability rights. Welcome back. And we continue discussions with diverse women leaders in their communities. And in this segment, the final segment, we're looking at compromising of safety, security, and dignity of women when it comes to disaster coordination processes. Again, Agu, just to start the conversation, how or what support do you think is needed in order that safety, security, and dignity are not compromised, especially for the vulnerable and the marginalized in our community?
Thank you for that. I think something that will come first that triggers me is the safety of the communities. To me, myself, the safety of the community, that it comes first with the family, and then it comes up to my neighbor and those who live around me. And with these people living around me, this is in terms of the older people, their safety, the person living with disability. These are the two main ones that I will have to look for their safety. To me, the safety and the security is very important in terms of before disaster. And I think that it is very important that we need to have a drill that is, for example, to have a drill in the village or in our settlement, that before a cyclone is coming, we need to be aware of what we have to do. For example, if we have a person living with disability, with a vision impairment, or a person with a wheelchair, when we have a drill in the communities, if we have a person with disability and if we have that in the community, the transact work, I might say, it will also help us as individuals and also with person with disability to also be aware of the movements for their safety. When the cyclone strikes or hurricane strikes, they will know what to do and where to go in terms of their safety and security.
I understand that you do some work with Red Cross, and that's pertaining to psychosocial support. What support do we need in regards to that?
Yes, I'm a trained psychosocial support, and something that we do is that as soon as after the cyclone, there's a time that we go to the communities. For Red Cross, we have assessment and distribution. So during assessment, when we go to the communities, to those families that have been affected, so the things that we do is that we talk to those families that have been affected, those families that have totally lost their homes, homes that have been washed away by the floods or any disaster. So that's the time that we come to them and just sit with them. Bring them a smile is something that is will give them something better in order for them to rebuild the house again. Because as soon as they lost the house, before they rebuild the house, we first have to rebuild their souls of the person. That is something that is very important for us as psychosocial support, is to rebuild them first personally, and then they will order to rebuild their household. So visiting to their communities and talking to them, giving them a laugh, or sharing them to unfold everything, or to give out every traumatized stories that they face during disaster. That is something that is very important, because what they face during disaster, the traumatized stories that they have, they will still face that after disaster. So as psychosocial first aiders, standbyers, that is what we do, because as soon as after disaster, what we've experienced is that when they finish, it takes time to rebuild. Because of what? The mentality is not that normal, because for them to rebuild their homes again.
Yes.
So rebuilding their mindset and to rebuild their souls again and helping their family members get together, that is something that they will motivate them to also rebuild their homes which they have lost in the disaster.
Thank you. That's a very important point. And that also means that when we're preparing for a cyclone, we need to mobilize and we need to ensure that psychosocial support is available. Yes. Thank you, Agu. And what we're looking at better, and maybe you can share your viewpoint on this, when we talk about local government organizing or local government structures organizing pre-cyclone, are evacuation center plans that are available, are they inclusive of all the people living in their communities, or is it just a one size fit all?
No, it is not inclusive, because always they send the communities to the schools. It is not comfortable for the people who are sick and the mothers, pregnant ladies, because the education center is in the hillside, and when they go there, some of them they don't want to go there, because the elderly people, they had to climb. And that time they need security for their safety. they need the evacuation in at the suitable place so that they can go in.
Yes.
And washrooms are also far away from the evacuation center. They have to go. And even the mothers, they need a fully equipped evacuation center so that they can feed their babies.
Thank you, Beda. Unaisi, what would be your views when it comes to persons living with disability and being safe in an evacuation center?
For evacuation center, for us in the western side, they are not really disability friendly. I would rather say not disability friendly because there's no ramps, there's no safe space for wheelchairs and for people walking in crutches. Most of us, they prefer schools. And for that, people living with disability, some of them, they prefer to stay at home rather than going to the evacuation center because it's not disability friendly.
Thank you. And before we conclude with the final segment, just quickly, what would be your Women's Weather Watch messages?
My Women's Weather Watch message is to be prepared now because we are coming closer to November to April, which is a cyclone season. I think when we prepare now physically and mentally, we can also overcome and also to defend ourselves for our safety and security during disaster to happen.
Thank you, Agubeda.
Thank you.
My message is to I think Women's Weather Watch, they are giving us the message so that we can pass in our communities. When when we had get the information from the Women's Weather from your leaders, you should be prepared and be alert.
Yes, thank you, Unaisi.
My Women's Weather Watch messages would, if the government of the day can support the women's network, for example, like this one, the Family Pacific, because from my view, the other ones that really goes down to the grassroots level, taking information and things that have been happening in the society, and for women of all diversity. If they can work together with this network in going out to the communities, make the use of the convenience that have been there in the communities, because they are the ones that really had the informations. And they're the ones that working with us, women leaders from the community, gathering information.
Thank you. And that's our episode of Radio with Pictures for today. Thank you, Beda, Unaisi, and Agu for joining us on this first episode of a new season of Radio with Pictures. Don't forget, you can continue to follow the conversation via our Twitter handle at Femling Pacific or log on to our Facebook page, and of course by tuning into Femtalk 89 FM in Lambasa and Suva. Until the next time, thanks for your company and bye for now.